Vampire counts. I don't want to be a dick. I'm just saying you need to be really invested in the image of the vampire counts to play their campaign, because for a lot of people, it is slow. They are a very grindy faction. They don't have any ranged capacity to speak of. Their monsters are pretty so it's a lot of undead infantry just slowly plowing through the enemy. You don't get proper cavalry until pretty late in the campaign. Well, I guess midway through the campaign, but still, it's a long time to rely on magic and zombies to carry you through. A lot of mortis engines, a lot of slow damage over time. You're going to play this campaign at ×3 speed. Now, even though they are an undead faction and evil, they are empire building. They like to take settlements, upgrade them, prosper. They have a pretty good working internal economy, so they don't really need to do much raiding, unlike their Vampire Coast brethren. A lot of the campaigns play roughly the same. You do have a pretty interesting social mechanic with the bloodlines, where if you do certain missions or obtain blood kisses by killing enemy lords, you can go up a certain family tree and get buffs for that type of lord. You can roleplay a little bit with it, but for now, it's not my favorite campaign. It feels a little slow. Auto-resolve as many battles as you can, please God. In multiplayer, vampire counts are currently strong in both game modes, and I imagine that they will always have the capacity to do so unless someone at CA just hates them and nerfs them into the dirt. For domination, they have a lot of staying power in the way that they are undead and they crumble slowly, and they have tons of healing to keep stuff in the fight. They have a lot of cheap infantry they can spam and sprint at points just to keep a little bit of pressure on, with cheap dog and bat units to harass your range stuff. They're always going to be a solid faction in the hands of really good players, I believe. In land battles, they also are quite strong. They can also be rather abusive to new players if you take a build and just bet that a new player is not going to be ready for it. They can blob pretty hard and mortis engine you down. You can lose the game if you went all melee into them. So, I'll get to that in the weaknesses. For vampire counts, your lord is your main character. He's your anime protagonist, or she, and you just always have to keep them alive. You always have to use them to win the game. The rest of the roster just isn't cost efficient without the lord. They will be your main carry. Whether it's Vlad dueling people, or many dragon lords with their breath attacks and spells, or Helmengorst draining the enemy team, your lord is 100% critical to you winning the game. Your hero roster is also pretty good. You have support and necromancers, nice crowd clearing in the White King, and dueling in the Banshee. Vampires are very rare because, again, your lord is always going to be a caster, so you don't usually need another caster. But the heroes on this roster are solid. Infantry is great. It slowly grinds out. You'll never really see Vampire Coast counts sprint through anything, but they'll hang around. They'll be here. And with proper healing support, which they have a ton of, these infantry get their weight back in gold. Their cavalry is where the things start to fall apart. So far, we've only had good things to say about them. Black Knights are very expensive for what they do. You almost always want the lances and barding for the improved charge. You can see the stat difference for 100 more gold is a little less speed, a little less melee defense, 36 charge bonus, and 30 more armor. So you usually just want the lances with barding. Hex rates are extremely expensive ethereal cav that is quite squishy. You need to know exactly why you're bringing them if you're ever going to bring them. And Blood Knights are a staple of the roster, but they are also 1700, so if they get focused down by Pit of Shades, Dwellers Below, or just Focus Fire, or you forget about them for a second, they will lose quite badly. And they don't have armor piercing, they have anti-large. Now, they are a good unit. I don't want to shit-talk them, but they're also not just, slap 3 of them in and you'll do fine. If you lose these units, you might lose the game. So their cavalry is important to the roster, but not actually that superb. For their monsters and beasts, their dogs are pretty good. Bats are fine, harassment tools, they won't kill anything. Cryptors are recently getting some buffs, so they're fine with running through the front line, and Vargolfs are crucial to some interesting air cheese builds. But they're very, very squishy with only 6,000 health and 10 armor, so Vargolfs frequently die if they aren't heal supported and cycle charged effectively. Vargolfs are a good single entity monster. Their stats are fine, their weapon strength is okay. The main things they get is that they have self-healing and healing on their roster, and they have kind of janky-ass models, where frequently they'll get knocked over, which helps them not take as much damage, and a lot of missiles will pass through them. So they're currently strong by jank. And I wonder if they'll stay strong and forever. And Terrorgeists are usually terrible. Usually. Armor-piercing anti-large, but they're expensive and squishy. So, the monsters of the Vampire Coast are necessary, not great. Same as the cavalry. Necessary, but not great if you really look at it for their cost. Artillery and war machines, that just means war machines. You have corpse carts. There's 3 variants. What each one does very briefly is a corpse cart gives infinite vigor and melee attack and melee defense. All of the corpse cards do that. So the basic version just doesn't have any extra bells and whistles. Unholy Lodestone has an area of effect heal. Balefire has an area of effect magical and flaming attacks imbuement. Weird. In the other game, it used to decrease enemy winds of magic, but it looks like now it just does flame resistance, so yeah. Black Coach is a chariot. It ramps up as the game goes on, getting more and more powerful for each kill it gets. It does cap out on scaling eventually, but it's pretty good in the right hands. And a Mortis engine, I keep saying Mortis effects. What is a Mortis effects? Because the Mortis engine was the first one. It's just an area of effect damage when it's in melee combat. That's all a Mortis engine means. It also has some Winds of Magic recharge and its own AoE healing. If you're playing the vampire counts, I did mention your Lord is your main character. You're going to want to play very carefully with them, know exactly when they have to do stuff and what they're supposed to be doing. Like if you have a dragon, you got to know that breath attacks from directly above something will do a lot of damage to a single target, and breath attacks from far away will do more damage in a straight line to a bunch of targets. So if you're trying to target infantry, be far away. If you're trying to target a character, be directly over it. Got to know things like that. You also got to know when your buffs and debuffs are up, and then how to cycle charge effectively, what situations you can charge into and not. Vampire counts are difficult to play, but rewarding when you learn how to play them. Infantry Frontline, you almost always take a bunch of zombies, back them up with some Graveguard of some kind, and you usually want at least 2 passive healing effects on your roster, either through the Necromancer, or through your own Lord, or through Corpse Carts with Unholy Lodestones. There's really not a reason to take any, to not take any of the healing. Without having range, the only way you'll avoid just being a blob and getting kited is the cavalry and monsters we just discussed. Now, I did say they're not great, but they are critical. You do need to control the mobile game as the vampire counts. You need some agency in the map, because if you just blob up and try to stat check people, a lot of good players will kite you out, or hit you with blob punishment spells, or shoot you, and you'll have a very bad time. So you need Blood Knights, Black Knights, Dogs, and Vargolfs to keep enemy skirmish in check and hold them in place for just a second while your front line walks up to them. Vampire counts, your general strategy is to run the enemy out of ammo and slowly drag them into the grave with you. Fighting the vampire counts. Lord sniping is nice if you can get it, but most of their lords have so much self-healing and tankiness that it is very hard to do a lord snipe. You mostly have to punish a enemy lord's mistake. So I wouldn't plan your entire strategy around that. The easier thing to do is try and snipe their healing, which might be their lord, but if they have any corpse carts with unholy lodestones or stuff, a cannon can take care of that. Taking care of their cavalry is also a must. You could have your own cavalry, you could have buffs and debuffs on the side, but you do want to get rid of the Blood Knights and Black Knights and Dogs if possible. Archers are key in the Vampire Counts matchup. Archers will always kill more than they are worth if you let them get their ammo out, so you got to protect them. Archers are quite strong in the Vampire Counts, and for magic, you want blob punishment. Blob punishment of any kind at all. Armor piercing or not. Final Trans or Heart of Winter or Burning Head and Pendulum. Really anything. Anything that does damage to a lot of infantry or models otherwise, you just need it. You need it. You gotta grind through them. You gotta. Yeah. Aside from that, it's just taking out the high priority targets. You start out the game, you keep the enemy lord honest, you snipe out their Blood Knights and their monsters, and you'll be fine. As long as you took the right magic so you can punish blobs in the late game. Because as they blob up their last few Graveguard and Skeletons around a single point of healing, you just need to nuke them down with spells. Yeah. Challenging the Vampire Counts to a blob fight is a lot like challenging Nurgle to a blob fight. That's why you used to see the meta was Vampire Counts versus Nurgle both just blobbing. They were trying to see which one's blob was better. Vampire Counts are also a faction that you just don't want to meet them on even terms. It's just not a fair fight. Like, I'm going to out-melee the Vampire Counts. Sure you are, bud. And you'll probably lose unless the enemy player makes a huge mistake. So, just don't. They don't have any range tools. That's a pretty big advantage you can lever with your own. If you're skirmishing against the Vampire Counts, remember you have to finish off units. If something struggles away with just a bit of health, it will heal up, and it'll even get models back as it heal caps. So, yeah. Don't just throw your ammo at zombies and shit. You really got to focus fire. Okay. That's it for the counts. Roar!
Subscribe, yes, yes.